Tabletop role-playing. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility, where one single choice can branch out into an infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the ones you know. I am the OGGM. I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question. What the fuck, Wizards of the Coast? What the actual fuck? What's up, nerds? It's your boy. It is the 30th day of December 2023. It is the night before New Year's Eve. How y'all doing on this rainy day? I'm still under a flash flood warning, though the sun is coming out. 20-foot waves are pounding Ventura County beaches as we speak, and it is time to put on our spooky voice, wind back the Wayback Machine to January 2023, and take a look at the most important thing that happened in the tabletop role-playing game world this year, and that was, howdy ma'am, it's my friend RPG Grandma. That was the OGL nonsense that Wizards of the Coast did. And I decided I'd start it with this because, it felt like a thing to start it with. All right, so let's rewind for those of you who do not know what happened in January. So around early January, a secret leak came out. We're still not quite sure where the leak came from, but there was a leak. And the leak said, originally, Wizards of the Coast was up to shenanigans involving the Open Gaming License. And the Open Game License has been around since the early 2000s. It allowed us to have games like Pathfinder, Mutants, and Masterminds. And it basically said, without getting too in deep, that you could use the core mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons at that time, which was like 24 years. If anybody wants to join me, let me know. I'll post it. You could use these mechanics to make games as long as you acknowledge that these mechanics originally came from D&D and some other stuff, And that gave us like 20 some odd years of games of relative quality. And some of those games evolved into really good games. And others of those games, well, most of those games kind of just petered off and faded into the distance. But the OGL allowed for the rebirth of the OSR, allowed us to get a lot of retro clones out there, and basically gave us 20 some odd years of just amazing small press, medium press, large press games. Some of those became awesome, like Mutants and Masterminds or Freeport, Tunnels and Trolls, some of the other stuff, and others not so much. But it was out there, and it let you publish it, and that was really, it was a publishing license. Well, January, Wizards of the Coast leaked. We don't know where the leak came from, that they were going to make some changes to it. And at first glance, these changes seemed pretty suspicious. In fact, so suspicious that within 24 hours, the entire gaming community was up in arms over what Wizards of the Coast's plans were. And then a few days later, there was another leak. And that made it look even worse. Not only was Wizards of the Coast apparently going after gamers and people who are making OGL product, they were claiming that they were going to stop the OGL product. They were going to go after any money people had made using the OGL for the past 24 years. They were going to go after anything in any way, shape, or form that connected to D&D, including things like cosplayers and artists. So like if Jess Nagiri, our friend Jessica, cosplayed as Drizzt, they would go after her for violating the OGL and violating the copyright. They're just going to, according to the leaks, go after everything. And this just got ugly and ugly and uglier. And every single day, there was more and more people just standing up against Wizards of the Coast. And then, of course, Wizards of the Coast, rather than stepping forward and saying, something, apology, something, remained quiet. they said nothing for almost 2 weeks. So they allowed this hatred and this anger to fester. And during that time, we managed to, amongst other things, crash D&D Beyond. Within a day-long period, D&D Beyond lost, well, depending upon who you believe, anywhere from 1,000 to 50,000 subscribers. Hasbro stock plummeted. I mean, it was a horrible week for Hasbro. It was a horrible week for Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast did nothing to fix it. They never told us where it was coming from. They never told us what they were trying to do. Eventually, they just said something like, well, we hear you. We're going to change it. We're sorry. And they said, you won, but we won too, which made Wizards, us, the people, even angrier. Just as everybody, for one beautiful minute, hated Wizards of the Coast. Now, this is not the first time Wizards of the Coast has done something stupid with D&D. In fact, we can go all the way back to 3.5 with stupid things that Wizards of the Coast has done regarding D&D. And it's not like they weren't building up to some super disaster. It's also not like they didn't tell us they had planned what they were going to do. Because if you remember in 2020, at the PulseCon of 2020, the then CEO of Hasbro came forward and made it very clear what the plans for Wizards of the Coast and D&D were. Just we didn't listen, and he didn't really make it clear enough, and nobody really expected what they did. Now, what they did in theory, okay, 24 years ago, this thing got out, and it's kind of just sort of blossomed into something that nobody intended. And after 24 years, maybe it's time to revisit it and try and make it make more sense, because language has changed, the community has changed, everything's changed. So let's just revisit this and see if we can maybe make it different, Okay. Not, because I always like to defend Wizards of the Coast with my bizarre theory of the Wizards of the Coast multiverse, where in some universe this made sense. So in some universe, this made sense. In some universe, if you go to the start of this train of thought, it made sense. Because the original idea was, let's just kind of revisit this. That's not awful. But then, of course, it's the way they did it, the words that they came out. They made, and it's not, they've been building up to this. They've been spending the past couple of years making people feel crappy because they played D&D. They were building up this hostility between the 5e players and everybody else. Statements like, if you played any game before 2014, it was racist. I mean, they were just allowing this to happen. And when those things exploded, they never backed down. They never apologized. They never tried to get ahead of it. And this is another example of something stupid coming out of Wizards of the Coast and them spending almost 2 weeks not saying anything, which is just horrible. They allowed that level of anger and hate and frustration to continue to build, and they did nothing to get ahead of it. And then when they tried, they only made it worse with a stupid comment like, you won, but we won. And that just made people more angry. And then we looked what they were going to do, and it's like, this is even stupider. So by the tail end of January, any goodwill Wizards of the Coast had from any end of the community was gone. And it's not just the old school, of which apparently I'm no longer a member. Actual 5e players were as up in arms as they were. I mean, there were people throwing away their Wizards of the Coast stuff. I mean, the level of hate that Wizards of the Coast garnered from every corner of their tabletop role-playing game community was just unprecedented. As far as even the Wizards of the Coast simps like Jeannie D, Bob Worldbuilder, Nerdarchy, all these other guys, Professor DM, Critical Role, were saying Wizards don't do this. Only one person that I'm aware of thought this was a good idea, and we all know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to say his name, but we only one individual was like, yeah, Wizards of the Coast, you go for it. Everybody else was like, fuck you, Wizards of the Coast. And as we know, out of this, we had several people and companies go, we're going to make our own thing. Wretched, Shadow Dark, Tales from the Vine. Oh, well, can I either jump in on mine or I'll jump in on yours? Because, yeah, that's good to know. I don't remember who broke it first. It might have been you. I just remember the original tweet, the original leak, and then the second leak, which was even worse, and then the entire week where Wizards did nothing to get ahead of it. And the way it read, it was just like, we're going to go after anybody. If I remember correctly, it was like they were going to go after like cosplayers and artists and Etsy and whatever. But then it just, they allowed the anger to fester, and they, allowed the two sides to put aside their temporary arguments with each other and all agree that, hey, Wizards is bad. It's bad when even the hardcore Wizards of the Coast fan base, the paid simps, are saying, I'm thinking Instructo Boy. All these people are just like, no, this is dumb. Okay, don't do this. So that began the year of Wizards of the Coast stupidity. And at the end of that month, Wizards of the Coast said, okay. We're not going to touch this. And you got to remember, their whole excuse when they finally did try and get in front of it, their whole excuse was, we didn't know people were using the OGL to do stuff. Oh, for the past 20 some odd years, we weren't paying attention. But now we see all the stuff people have used to make with stuff with the OGL, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not what we meant. How did we spend 20 years and miss all this? Who's this Jessa Nagari chick? What's this Mutants and Mastermind stuff? What is Etsy? What's this Critical Role thing? You guys are all using our shit and we didn't say it was okay? How did we miss that? That was one of their excuses. They didn't know. Somehow they didn't know that people were using the OGL. Just anything that came out during that month was just ridiculous. You could obviously tell they were panicking, and you could obviously tell that there were people in the actual offices who wanted this not to happen, but were afraid of their jobs. And what do they do? What do they do finally at the end of January when they decide we're going to pick one of our people to go and be the scapegoat? All not true. Okay, please correct me if whatever I'm wrong. I could be incorrect. So they picked the scapegoat, and who did they pick? They picked their boy Kyle. Poor Kyle was their scapegoat. They said, you're gonna go and do the interviews. And January is coming to an end. The anger was starting to subside. We were starting to fight amongst each other again. We were becoming, oh, you're racist, blah, blah, blah. The OSR, OGL was going after the Sparkle trolls again. Wizards of the Coast looked like they'd distracted us enough. And then they put out their little apology and their little thing about, oh, we're going to put it under a new Creative Commons, and this is what we're going to do. But then they let Kyle go out there. Kyle was chosen to be the scapegoat, the figurehead, the guy. He was the one who oh yeah. You mean about the thing about they didn't know? So Kyle goes out. His first interview is with three black halflings. I don't know. It was a person of color and a person of color and Kyle. And they're asking Kyle about this and that and this and that. And they get to the point about, what happened and the evolution of the hobby. And of course, this is the point where Kyle makes his now infamous statement about white people like him can't leave the hobby fast enough. You couldn't pay anybody to come up with something more stupider than that. So once again, Wizards of the Coast. I'd love to hear about it. I'm always looking for ways to improve the quality of my content. So, if you ever want to talk about it, please let me know. Rolled for Combat. I appreciate it. Because, that's my thing is news. I don't really do anything else really good. And obviously what I'm saying is filtered through a layer of sarcasm and silliness and my bad memory and just trying to make light of a ridiculous year. So, obviously, well, I haven't gotten to that yet. I haven't gotten to the offices yet. That's more recent. Okay. But yes. Okay. So we had the Kyle Brink disaster. And that just, reignites the OSR versus the Sparkle Trolls, the woke group, the critters. That just even OSR was going against other OSR people on the right. People on the right side of the OSR were going after people on the left side of OSR. I got attacks from not only my fellow members of the old school, but the Sparkle Trolls. The weird thing is the actual 5e players were pretty much the most, as I assure you, 5e players, every 5e player I talked to, and I talked to like 100, not only all the 5e players here in Ventura, but 5e players who I talked to online, they were just as angry at Wizards of the Coast as we were, because Wizards of the Coast was technically going after them too, because Wizards of the Coast was saying basically, you can't use our shit unless X, you can't use our shit unless Y. And we, the people who were fighting to basically say, no, that's wrong. You should be able to play it. We were fighting to give the OGL a future, but we were also fighting to give 5e a future because they were going after third-party 5e creators as well. So if you're a 5e person and you wanted to make 5e product, they were basically saying no, whatever. And then there was all the other stuff like the art and the cosplayers, and they were just shotgunning anything that was any way, shape, or form even remotely connected to what the concept of D&D was fair game under the initial blanket stuff. They attacked fans, whatever. But then it came to an end, and then they set Kyle loose, and Kyle just broadcasted his stream of stupidity. And again, okay, what Kyle's saying, yeah, if you backwards it all the way back to the universe where this makes sense, okay, I get what you're saying. The audience has evolved, and you don't feel you are a representative of that audience anymore. Okay, Kyle, that's fine. Maybe you should step down. But no, he just said a stupid thing, which started more culture wars. And then that just included the idiocy. So how does Hasbro respond to this? They're getting into February, March. They say they buy brand new property and tell Wizards of the Coast to move to this brand new property. So Wizards of the Coast's office are not in any way, shape, or form attached to where they used to be attached to. They are now a separate entity from Hasbro. Okay? And then Hasbro, of course, starts the whole digital evolution of D&D. We start hearing about the VTT. We start hearing about how everything's going to be backdoored through D&D Beyond. We start hearing about 2024 D&D. And what we hear about 2024 D&D at the beginning sounds like a disaster. Sounds like a 10-page errata that you're turning into a disaster. And those of us who are alive long enough, yeah, we did. I mean, people turned against her. including her fans, because she finally was an adult. It was one of the few times I actually respected her. And now I've lost my train of thought. Don't do this, kids, when you get to reach my age. So we're into February. We're dealing with the aftermath of Kyle. They've moved offices, and now we're finding out not only about the plans for 2024 D&D or one D&D, we're finding out the plans about the digitization of D&D and the future of D&D. And what it sounds like is, okay, going forward, there's not going to be any more physical product. It's all going to be digital. It's all going to be on D&D Beyond. You're going to have to pay to use D&D Beyond, and then you're also going to have to pay to rent the games. And there was some other stuff. It was like, and everybody got mad at that. And then that also started the whole other round of boycott D&D, boycott D&D Beyond, all the things they were doing about the digitization of D&D. Nobody wanted to do that. But remember when they said phylactery was a racist word? We started hearing words like D&D the brand. We heard about the D&D movie. Okay, Comic Book Con comes out, and we're like, hey, there's a D&D movie coming out. And everybody's like, it's too late. There already was a D&D movie. It was called Hawk the Slayer. And who do they have talking about the D&D movie? This drugged out Chris Pine with his undone shirt and his drugged out hair, and it looks like he'd just been dragged off the beach. And then after they announced the D&D movie, it goes through its initial screenings right after Comic-Con. People hate it. And they're like, we're going to push it back. And only one person was able to find good things about it. And that person said it was going to be a multi-billion-dollar franchise starter and make more money than Harry Potter and the MCU and Star Wars together. We all know how that came true. So that brings us into March, right? Comic-Con, D&D movies pushed back. Racism, sexism, digitization of D&D. All right, well, now we're all, but then that, and of course the digitization of D&D was not a surprise. They told us they were going to do this in 2020. And again, on the surface, okay, there's nothing wrong with your choice. Eventually, everybody who does print media is going to have to digitize. I'm not going to say yes, but I'm not going to say no. Just going to say there's an individual who said that the movie was going to make more money than Star Wars, the MCU, and Harry Potter together and be a franchise starter. And he was also the same person who was one of the only people who thought what they did in January was a good thing. But I'm not going to say his name. All right, where was I? Okay. So the digitization shouldn't come as a surprise, especially since they told you they were going to do this, right? And, paper is at a minimum. There are 25% less trees than there were 5 years ago. So that announcement wasn't a shock. The way Wizards of the Coast presented us with that announcement, of course, was a complete disaster. And another chance to argue. Yeah, we're coming to that because that's about now this time. So now we've got that angry thing. And then I can't remember if this happened before the content thing or after the content thing. But let's not forget that Wizards of the Coast has a whole nother department for a whole nother game, a game that normally is their big money seller. Magic the Gathering. And it was Magic the Gathering's 30th anniversary. Magic the Gathering has been around for 30 some odd years. So they decide we are going to, was this before? I don't remember when this was, but I'm just sort of spitballing here. We're going to release a 30th anniversary special Magic the Gathering set. Okay, brilliant, perfect. That's going to have cards in it that we haven't seen for a long time. In fact, going all the way to alpha. So Black Lotus. Oh, amazing. These cards are not tournament legal. Well, that makes sense. Black Lotus isn't tournament legal, except in some rare, weird tournaments. So, okay, fine. They're not tournament legal. We could play them in Highlander. You could play them in fun games, but they're not going to be tournament legal. That's fine. Okay, a reprint of a Black Lotus is going to be fine. This set is going to cost $1,000. Well, that's okay. I mean, it's ridiculous for Magic the Gathering, but that's okay because let's say I get a Black Lotus. That's worth 15 grand, right? So, all right. This set that's going to cost $1,000 is going to have the same limits as it had originally. So you have the same chance of getting a Black Lotus in this set as you did back in Alpha. So 1 in 15,000 chance. Well, I don't know if I want to pay $1,000 if I'm not getting a replica of the Black Lotus guaranteed, or at least a better chance of getting it than, what I would have. But I mean, I've never had a Black Lotus, and I've never had some of these cards, so maybe it's still worth $1,000. By the way, these cards are completely unplayable. They're proxies. Oh, so you're charging me for $1,000, telling me ahead of time that I have basically no chance of hell of getting the good cards that I actually are worth it. They're not playable in tournaments, but they're actually not playable at all. Guess how many of those sold? None. So all this is happening. Wizards of the Coast finally says, this is how we're going to fix the disaster of January. We're going to re-release the 5e SRD under a brand new Creative Commons license. And we're going to have a conference here in Seattle where we're going to invite a whole bunch of people to talk about the VTT, to talk about what happened in January, to talk about the future of D&D. We're going to invite Jeannie D. We're going to invite Bob World Builder. We're going to invite game designers. We're going to invite fans. We didn't invite the OGGM. We thought about it, but let's face it, he's way too important. By the way, we're not going to pay for this. But we're going to hold this basically, where they have those things like where you go to a hotel and they give you a free lunch, but you have to watch a 2-hour video for about like timeshares. Basically, that was it was. You have to pay to get here. You have to pay for the room. We're not going to pay. We're not going to cover anything except like comp you a couple drinks. Of course, they're going to comp you drinks, and you have to sit through this thing. And we're going to talk about everything. What are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about the new we're going to talk about the new thing. Oh, okay, the new thing. By the way, the new thing is under a new Creative Commons. Yeah, okay. It's the wrong Creative Commons. What? Well, there's a CC1A and a CC1B, and we put it under CC1A, but turns out that's the wrong one to do what we wanted to do. So basically, when the new thing comes out in 2024, it won't be covered by the thing we just released. Weird. Was that an accident or intentional? Yeah, we're going to list things in here that we own the copyright to, but we're not going to let you use the copyright. But we put it in the thing, so technically you could use the copyright, like Beholder, because we put it under the wrong thing. So that's how that started. Then they started getting into the digital thing. But you know who they invited to this thing amongst all the other pieces of people who were in the industry? They invited people who have been vehemently opposed to Wizards of the Coast, like Daniel Kwan and Connie Chung. And they let Connie Chung come into a meeting about the diversity of D&D, and they let her turn a 20-minute video meeting into an almost hour-and-a-half long argument over the racism of D&D. Connie Chung, who happily takes the money that Wizards of the Coast gives her, but still managed to spread her lies and her misinformation and her campaign of hate, ruining whatever goodwill might have come out of that. So now we have Kyle Brink and his white people can't leave the hobby fast enough. We've got Wizards of the Coast saying, all right, the future is all going to be on D&D Beyond. We've got this VTT. It's going to be how you play D&D in the future. Everything's going to be digital. Physical's dead. We're cutting ties with everything. Whatever. Okay. Surely things can't get worse. The digital thing could be fit. As long as you don't do something like continuously change the playtest or let it be known that the playtest had a preconceived ending in the first place or any of the other things. Okay. So, now we're getting into summer. What happens in summer? Well, we get more Magic the Gathering. We get the second half of Magic the Gathering sets. A friend of ours somehow gets their hands on a Magic the Gathering set before they're supposed to. And that individual shows that Magic the Gathering set on camera. Technically violating street date, but not really. Now, there's a couple things you could have done like that. What he did wrong? Well, he claims he didn't know. He claims he bought the set fair and square from his shop. And as far as he knew, it was legal because his shop had it. And the guy who owned the shop says it was in the box. So I assumed it was okay. Otherwise, why would you have shipped it to me, Wizards of the Coast, if it wasn't okay for me to have this for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? So I sold it to him. He put it on his website because we all thought it was okay. Turns out, technically, violated street dates. But really, I wasn't trying to make money off of these. I was just showing him. If anything, Wizards should have been excited about the free press I was giving them for an upcoming product because I was building up excitement for an upcoming product. Well, yeah, if I was Wizards of the Coast, I would be excited. But I could see Wizards of the Coast saying, wait a minute, you're violating our thing. What we're going to do is we're going to call you. We're going to call you and discuss this with you. Maybe have you take the video down. We're going to send you a cease and desist. That's what we should do. We're going to send you a cease and desist to not continue showing these, take the video down, and send the stuff back to us. And in return, we'll compensate your loss. Now, that's what Wizards should have done. But instead of all the possible things they could have done, they picked the worst possible media disaster way to do it. They sent strong-arm Pinkerton detective thugs to the guy's house, armed with guns, demanding all the cards while him and his wife and his child were there. Basically violating Lord knows how many ordinances and stuff to intimidate their way in to get the stuff. Wizards of the Coast doesn't even apologize. In fact, they're okay with it. They try and say stuff like, oh, no, we were in the rights, blah, blah, blah. Well, obviously that leads to another disaster of media. And Wizards of the Coast finally says, fine, we'll give them some money, and we're a very blanket apology. So Magic the Gathering is now in a disaster between the anniversary set and the Pinkertons thing. What are we going to do? Oh, we're going to, the only way we can save Magic the Gathering is these licenses, because people don't care about Magic the Gathering anymore, but they're think, hey, they have a Doctor Who license. That's cool. Hey, they've got a Lord of the Rings license. That's cool. Okay, let's do that. That'll earn us some good karma. How did this guy get that set of cards in the first place, man? Wizards? Magic? Pixies? Because it had to leave your warehouse. It had to arrive at the store, and there had to be something in there to allow him to think that it was okay for him to sell this before street date. because otherwise there should have been the little warning on top of it saying, do not sell before date. But there wasn't. Anyways, close the door on that one. Okay, so this is where we stand right now, right? We got all the anger towards Wizards of the Coast because of the D&D debacle and them not doing anything to basically appease. We've got all the anger at Wizards of the Coast because of all the Magic the Gathering stuff, and they haven't done anything to appease the audience. Meanwhile, the playtest results are starting to come in for 1D&D. Now, about this time, we find out, amongst other things, it was never meant to be called 1D&D. Okay, well, we've been calling it 1D&D for a year now, but that was never meant to be called 1D&D. All right. So, playtest comes out. Survey for playtest comes out. Playtest survey does not go the way Wizards of the Coast wants it to. They make that very clear. Roll out Jeremy Crawford to spend 40 minutes to an hour talking about it, during which time he continues to say things that makes people even more angry at Wizards of the Coast. New playtest comes out. Playtest test survey. Survey does not respond the way Wizards of the Coast wants it to. Wizards of the Coast makes it very clear they wanted very specific responses to the survey. So, new playtest. And this repeats over and over and over again for an entire year. For an entire year, Wizards of the Coast releases playtests for 1D&D, which I think at this point we know is ready. It's done. Sends out a survey, gets the results for the survey, rolls out Crawford for another hour to talk about how he didn't get the survey results he wanted. Excuse me, I need a drink of water. So then they say, well, you know what? We didn't get the answers we wanted, so fuck you. We're just going to re-release this new thing, and we're not going to change anything. Okay, well, then we don't really need it. You're releasing an errata to cover the past 10 years, right? An errata's fine. I'm willing to pay 10, 15, 20 bucks for an errata. No, we're still going to release 3 brand new books. Digital first, physical second. And you still need to buy them to continue to play. Because even though we continue to tell you it's backwards compatible, we're also telling you the characters do not equal each other, and the rules will now automatically default to the new rules, superseding any of the old rules. Oh, okay. Well, I have a feeling a lot of people are just going to jump ship and go play another 5e game because what you're saying just doesn't make any sense. Which brings us, wow, almost 40 minutes. Okay. We're halfway through the story arc of continuing stupidness of Wizards of the Coast. But of course, we can't forget the AI art disaster. And the oops, we didn't know it was AI art. And the Bigsby thing with the 12 pages of AI art in a product that somehow Wizards missed. So they had to go back in and change the art. Well, what did this tell us? Well, Wizards of the Coast basically told us that if your product is on D&D Beyond, we can go into your product at any point in time and change it without you knowing. So not only are you paying to use D&D Beyond, you're paying basically to rent this product from us, a product that we can change at any point in time without telling you. And if you put your product on D&D Beyond, we can go in and change it and not tell you. Also, yeah, basically, once you put it on D&D Beyond, it becomes ours. So basically, by now, everything Wizards of the Coast has done makes absolute no sense. Magic the Gathering is a disaster. It's only the fact that there are cards like the one single solitary one ring card that Post Malone bought and the Doctor Who stuff that's making Magic money. D&D is a disaster. Any goodwill D&D has is basically lost, both from the 5e players and from the OSR. If the OSR wasn't so busy attacking each other, we might actually have accomplished more this year. But, you know, the old school likes too much to just basically be angry. I can say that because apparently I've been officially kicked out of the old school. That's a separate topic. Now, friends, because we're getting a little long in the tooth here. So here's the thing, which we started with this, and I'm going to end it with this. None of these choices are on paper bad choices, right? I mean, technically they all make sense, right? For now I am. I'm definitely not in the old school anymore. That was made very clear to me when I said I wasn't going to back Adventurer Conqueror King 2nd edition. Oh boy, the hate I got for that. Every choice that Wizards of the Coast has made this year. Oh, Hasbro destroying. Okay, that if I want to keep going on this one, but we'll tail end this one because I've already done that one, but we'll tail end it again. Makes kind of sense. They've always made fucked up sense. It's not what they do, it's the way they do it. It's like Wizards of the Coast is writing a book, a masterclass of how not to run a business. Yes, thank you. Please back it. Give me my money. I need money. Remember, I will sell out. I want to remain wretched as long as they want me to. It's a masterclass in bad business. 4th edition, masterclass in how not to run a company. 3 and 3.5. Everything since 3.5 is a masterclass in how not to run a company. And this year has been no different. All right. So Hasbro gives them a new office, right? Other side of the lake. It's a 2-story building. Bottom story, Magic the Gathering. Upper story, D&D. D&D, as of last month, is now referred to as D&D Studios. Thank you for ordering, Wretched. I sent you the links. Hopefully that helped. Jeremy Crawford is now the head D&D architect. Jeremy Crawford lets us know that he's on one side of the building and Chris Perkins is on the other side of the building, and they have very little conversation with each other. So yeah, Magic the Gathering's got one side, D&D's got second side. They're now 2 separate entities: Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering, D&D Studios. Yeah, somebody else told me that. We get the Q3 numbers. The Q3 numbers show us that the only part of Hasbro America that made a profit was Wizards of the Coast Digital. Hasbro Digital. This part of this profit comes from them selling off the movie company. But, the Monopoly Online and all the other online stuff that they already have shows a profit. Peppa, of course, shows a profit because it's Peppa. A couple of the other things show a profit, but Power Rangers is a disaster. Transformers is a disaster. Even Nerf's failing to make the money. The only thing that shows a 40% profit, Wizards of the Coast Digital. How does Hasbro respond? Mass terminations! You're fired. 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 Wizards of the Coast goes, oh no, we're okay. They're not firing any of us. They're just firing Hasbro people. 1,100 Hasbro employees. The very next day, hey, D&D, Wizards of the Coast, you're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. Mike Merles, you're fired. Dan Dixon, you're fired. But we actually do shit. Nope, you're gone. Well, what about Kyle Brink? Is Kyle Brink fired? Nope, Kyle Brink's still there. Is Jeremy Crawford fired? Nope, Jeremy Crawford is there. Is Megan fired with her stupid autism thing? Nope. And of course, we also have the thing with with the stupid cards from the Deck of Many thing. We have this whole stupid thing with McKinsey. I could go on and on for hours, guys, but I don't think you want to hear me say this. So now we're going to get to Grandma's point here. Hasbro has destroyed Wizards of the Coast. People talk about the D&D killer, the D&D killer, the D&D killer. AI is going to kill D&D. This game's going to kill D&D. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Dungeons and Dragons, the brand is fine. That name, that word that Hasbro owns is fine. Because much like Mickey Mouse, they can just put that word on anything, and that's profit. In fact, it is more profitable to them, the brand, than the game. D&D, the game, doesn't really make that much money. D&D, the brand, makes them way more much money. That D&D t-shirt you're wearing makes them more money than D&D, the brand. The game. They don't care about the game. They don't care what Wizards of the Coast is doing. Wizards of the Coast has a sword of Damocles that has been hanging over their head since 2020, making it perfectly clear that they had to make a certain amount of money every year by 2027 or else. And right there on the calendar for June 2027, it still says D&D 6X. That has not changed. So as far as Hasbro's concerned, if Wizards of the Coast doesn't make X by that time period, they can they can go, well, I don't really need you, Wizards of the Coast. And there's a lot of, impetus for Hasbro to spin Wizards of the Coast off. And Hasbro has been giving stuff that Wizards of the Coast used to do to other companies. The board games are now all done by a different company. All the other licenses that Hasbro owns that they've turned into role-playing games like Transformers and My Little Pony are covered by a different company. All Wizards of the Coast is making is Magic the Gathering on one floor. Well, I want to come over and play, and D&D on the other floor. And D&D is slowly being transformed from a physical media empire to a digital media empire. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to stop making physical product, but it's definitely going to cut down the amount of physical product, and we're going to see less physical product, and we're probably going to see the physical product release same way we've seen it tail end of this year and going into next year, when we will definitely know when the digital is out, i.e. Deck of Many Things, but the physical will be indefinitely pushed back until they have enough money to make printing it's worth it. Because if you remember, the excuse for not having the Deck of Many Things out was their printer couldn't print out the cards, which was, of course, utter bullshit because you've been making cards for 30 years and they have it in Germany. Hasbro is Wizards of the Coast's worst enemy because Hasbro allows these disasters to happen. Hasbro lets Wizards of the Coast do this stupidity and does nothing to pivot. They just allow Wizards of the Coast to continue to run into the ocean. They have people at Hasbro whose job it is to basically go, are you sure you want to say that? But when it comes to Wizards, they don't. Leading right up to the latest AI disaster thing with the AI art on the Player's Handbook poster, or leading to the thing where we don't know the dates when this new stuff's coming out. They let this stupidity happen. They don't do anything to stop it when there are people whose job it is to go, hey, are you sure you want to do that? What the fuck, Hasbro? Is it they want Wizards of the Coast to fail? Or is it just that they figure even all bad press is still press? And there's some sense behind that, and we can use the conspiracy and the controversy over the little introductory module. Before all the old school got angry about the little introductory module thingy, nobody knew about it. Nobody knew shit about it. Wizards mentioned it once at PAX. It's on D&D Beyond. There's no direct link to it. It's behind like 3 other links to get to it. It was a one and done. They didn't, but then we come out and we're like, oh, how dare you give this D&D advice? And suddenly the amount of hits that site got quadruples. The number of downloads the little nothing module got quadruples. Look at all the free press we gave that product. I'll watch it, but I've noticed sometimes she's a little incorrect, but she's still fun to watch. Which one? Oh, is that the Instructor Boy scandal? Probably. I'll go watch it. But yeah, I think she's talking. That's the only scandal I can think of. Okay. That's 50 minutes too long. And I'm losing my train of thought. And, I'm sure Jim will do a better version of what I'm saying. So in closing, what the fuck, Wizards of the Coast? But let's face it, D&D's whatever is coming out next year. It'll make money. But yeah, D&D as we understand it doesn't exist anymore. It's a whole new thing. And, it's better just to have our memories about what it was. Let Wizards do whatever they're going to do until Hasbro decides it's not worth it, and play other games and just stop hating on each other. I mean, and investing all this negative energy in Wizards. All it does is give Wizards free press. Play GURPS, especially the GURPS products I wrote. Yes. Poor Wizards of the Coast. They're just the victim. They haven't done anything wrong. Happy New Year's, everybody. I will not be on tomorrow. So if there's anything else you want to talk about today, please let me know. Otherwise, this will be my final broadcast for 2023. Take care. Stay safe. Thanks to each and every one of you who have been part of the OGGM Adventures this year, or Cal, who's been part of the OGGM Adventures forever. And whether I have 2 subs or 2,000 subs, I appreciate each and every one of you. 2024, I'm going to do more of the same. Hopefully you appreciate it. I might learn how to, edit and make the videos look a little better. But, I thought long and hard about what I could do in 2024 to get more views. I could easily just devote entire episodes to going after a certain individual whose name we won't name. I could hate post like certain other people, and that would definitely get me more subs, but I don't want to. If I never hit that 2,000 sub mark, that's fine. I'd rather do what I enjoy doing. And if you enjoy listening to me do it, that's great. And I appreciate every one of you for being part of this. And we will see you all next year. Until then, you must remember this.